video, I am thrilled and delighted and honored to chat with Daymond Jones. Daymond has been operating an unincorporated ministry and helping others with their private ministries, faith-based associations, and private membership associations for longer than most of us have known about our true rights and liberties. Daymond, I'm so happy to have you here, and welcome.
Lord. I am very honored and glad to be here. I think part of my commission in life from God is to teach and educate God and what emanates from God and how he created life and he created the law, and how men have strayed from that and moved the landmark. And so I'm trying to put the landmarks back with good men and women, and by teaching in question and answers, people can learn. And that's my main ministry, is to educate people on God and man.
Great. Well, after spending some weeks with you now, I have to say that you're doing a great job, and I'm just really excited to have you here and to help more people. Yeah.
Right on.
So I've been working on, well, I should say we at PMA Power, the group, we've been working on a thing that we're calling the Pillars of Protection. And so I have written down some things like universal law, God's law, the right to privacy. We've got some good case law. People love case law with Hale versus Henkle. We've got the references in the Bible. I've got some other case law. But I'm wondering if you would bless us with your explanation of how this private pillar works for us in relation to private ministries and associations and churches.
I tell people everything without fail that you see, know, and don't know came from God. And there's a principle in law among men that he who creates, owns, and controls. So man thereby extrapolates God created it, he owns it, and he's in control of it. And anything and everything that is repugnant to that is null and void, as if it were never a law, period, unequivocally. Mm-hmm. When we created our Constitution, the men that did this had 675 years of charters of treaties, declarations of liberty, freedom, privacy, etc. And then they had, I can't remember the name of the tribe, but they was in the northeast of what's the United States of America now. Mm-hmm. And they had treaties on parchments or deer skin, that I'm not positive on. And they took theirs and the 675 years across all of Europe and other places in the world, and they basically created a Declaration of Independence. And that's what it says. It's a declaration stating we're independent, and putting all those facts into there. Then they created, after the Revolutionary War, for lack of a better word, they created the Constitution. Then they created the Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. And the Bill of Rights, most people don't think of it like this. And when I talk to state and federal judges and other attorneys I know and legal scholars, they're like, how did you come up with this? I said, God put it in my mind. The Bill of Rights is a restraining order on our public servants. Mm-hmm. You have private servants that you hire and work on your land or your home or your business. They're private servants. They serve you. That's it. You have public servants that come out of the public trust that's paid for by the people that pay taxes, right. And it goes into the public treasury, and they become officers of the public treasury, and they take an oath to the Constitution, and that Constitution says this is a restraining order. You can't interfere with people's religion, their freedom of assembly, their privacy, their right to be armed, whatever their rights are, you can't go there. You have to use true law not copyrighted law, not statutes and codes that are not law, but reflections of law, you have to use that accordingly for the due process to make sure that judges only issue warrants when appropriate, and upon probable cause. And it's for exactly what it says. And the police officer or the person applying for it has to swear under penalty of perjury that this stuff is accurate. So the judge is believing that this public trust officer has told them the truth, and that the truth brings probable cause but not certainty, and they issue the warrant and they go do it. And we were taught from 1978, I know until 2010, maybe even after then, I haven't been for mandatory training or other things that law enforcement do, but they teach you have two different spheres. One here, one here, one here, one here, however you want to say it.
Right.
One is public domain. Public trust and public officers work in public domain. Public, like that one comedian say, public domain. I was thrown into public. Okay, that's over here. Over here is God, man, and their private affairs of God and men is over here. They're at arm's length from each other. They never touch. They don't even come close. There's always that big divide. A country club, like they would teach us, for example, was a well-known example of a private member association.
Okay.
And do not set foot on their land, do not call them, do not contact them, have nothing to do with them. They're private. The only time you can go over on their land, go talk to them, unless you are invited. If you're invited, that's a consent to come.
Right.
Okay. They know you're public, but they're allowing you in there for a purpose. Okay, because they're still citizens. They still retain all their inalienable God-given rights, which is recognized, ordained, and guaranteed in the Constitution. So you go there for that purpose. Okay. Maybe they've been vandalized and they want you to do an extra patrol, and they authorize you to patrol their roads.
Right.
That's up to them. But unless they offer it, it doesn't exist. The only way you can go on their land is an immediate, substantial, credible evil, because you're piercing, like the balloon, you're piercing their privacy of their assembly of free association. Is examples given. If you heard a child screaming or yelling, a lady hollering or screaming, then you have what's called a public alarm.
Okay.
You call dispatch and tell them that something's going on here and that you're going, and to send some backup, because you don't know what you're getting into. You go to the sound. If it was children playing and it was a false alarm, that's a self-evident truth. And maybe some of the adults come and say, "What are you doing here?" I heard some screams and hollers, and I thought there was a life and death situation. So I came here. It's a self-evident truth. Nothing is. I did my job. I'll be leaving now. And that's it. If somebody come running out from the road and they had blood all over their shirt, okay. Anything that shows it's immediate, it's substantial, and it's so evil that the public can be harmed by it, right, or people that are in their private status are still citizens and something is being done to harm them. And only for that purpose. That doesn't allow them to go in the building, go looking around at everything. That would require a warrant.
Okay.
Unless you consent. I don't consent to squat.
Yeah.
I have been stopped by police like everybody else.
Right.
I know the law. Even when I was an active chief of police or a ranger, I never consented. And I was just testing the system.
Right.
And I would not say what my background was because I wanted to test if they knew the Constitution, they knew the law.
Right.
I wound up in 2-hour conversations on the side of the road with state patrol or county or city police, and they're like, that's not what they teach in the academy. They actually do, but you didn't understand it, or they mistaught it, or something's wrong because you're not knowing the truth and you can't enforce the law when you don't know what the law is.
You don't know what it is. Yeah. So what you're saying is, okay, like the country club example, private membership club, a private membership association. And that would be the same for a private social club, a private drinking club, as well as one of our unincorporated private ministries or faith-based health associations. Same rules, correct?
Yes, correct. You know, what some people don't understand is, say, even if you got this, a church that's not incorporated,
Mm-hmm.
and the church, according to God, is in each man or woman. You have a building that you may gather under a roof somewhere and worship together, but you are the church, literally and period. And that's been in the scriptures, and it's been taught and trained repeatedly. So that's why they call it a church body. Okay.
Right.
I got a hand, but it's got different fingers. And I got an arm, I got a head, I got legs, but it's part of the body.
Right.
So you're individually the church and collectively the church. You're putting it on a written document because tribal people from all over the world that were tribalistic or tribes, they had the law in their head and in their heart, and they knew do no evil or there's consequences and be fair and square. The Judeo-Christian belief out of Europe was everything must be on a paper. If it ain't on the paper, it doesn't count. But, you know, the founders took care of that by saying these are self-evident truth. Self-evident truth need not be. And so these Supreme Court cases, flagships like Shuttlesworth versus Birmingham, NAACP, or Alabama versus NAACP,
Right.
Those are landmark cases that have existed 50, 60 years.
Right.
And the important thing is they've never been overturned in part or in whole. That our government services, just like God created us, he's the creator of us.
Right.
He has full authority. We turned around and created a servant. Now we're servants and children of God. We have inalienable rights. We said we're going to be careful and we're going to give our public servants privileges and immunity so that they can actually do their job and not be in court 24 hours a day to defend doing what they're supposed to do. So they have a certain amount of immunity, but it was limited, and a certain amount of privileges it was given, but never rights.
Yeah.
And so this is an absolute. And unfortunately, they created statutes, codes, and other things to try and chip away. And so that's perverted, because your field hand, which is your public servant, like the vineyards and stuff, your field hand, you got to fire them, hire them, you were the boss.
Right.
But this creature that we created called government has become a wild horse.
Yeah.
Okay. And it bucks like a mule. So they're trying to, we're here and they're here.
Right.
They're trying to be here and put us here.
Yep.
They're doing a flipping of the pyramid because your local power is the most extreme in your county.
Yep.
Then it's the state, then it's the federal government.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at the top of the pyramid, at you, then the county, then the state, then the federal government. Federal government's last, but they're trying to flip it upside down through indoctrination in public schools. And in 1964, LBJ, after Kennedy was murdered, he stopped the printing presses from making U.S. Treasury dollars, which have no interest. And because it was constitutionally legitimate, it had the sitting president's picture on the $5 bill.
Ah.
Okay, fiat currency only has dead presidents that's been dead like 20 years or more. I can't remember what their little statute says.
Yeah.
Okay, so he stopped it, and people say what they want to, but Kennedy didn't get murdered until he messed with the money.
Yeah.
Okay, the next thing he did is he did the Civil Rights Act, and he was a known bigot and racist. However, he said in order for the Democrats, this is not political, it's just stating a fact.
Yeah.
He said, in order to create a guarantee that we stay in office and that we hold large majorities, I'm going to get this Civil Rights Voting Act passed. And he used the words similar to this, but not exactly, for a little digestion. I'm going to make every Negro in America become a Democrat for the next 50 years. And he did a lot of nasty, filthy things to force people to do this, to make this. At the same time, he, in the federal education system, he said, we're doing away with civics. Why? Because I'm the president and I said so. Well, civics teaches you all this stuff.
Right.
And he said, we're going to change civics to government. And that's all he said, but that meant government taught by government. And it's actually a religion when you break it down. So it's government teaching government religion. And it's a brainwashing and taking you over to government away from God.
Right. So thank you for that. That's such a good history lesson and reminder for people who may know and others who don't know. And what you were saying about us as the body, the individual has privacy as well as the unincorporated church, because it hasn't said, here, I'm giving you permission to intrude on my operation here, my church here. In Hale versus Henkle, another case that has not been overturned, if I'm correct on that, they say the individual may stand upon his constitutional rights, and he's entitled to carry on his private business in his own way. His power to contract is unlimited. He owes no duty to the state or to his neighbors to divulge his business or to open his own doors to an investigation, and so on. So this again is that individual privacy protection that we've sadly forgotten, and then the association or the church or the ministry protection as well. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I teach people straight up and down, from conception to death, you're invested with inalienable rights by God. Now, when you're in the womb, you don't get to vote or say stuff. And until you're 18, you don't get to vote or say stuff. Okay. But your rights are there, and the parent's duty and responsibility under the laws of God are to protect and defend that child using their inalienable rights and oversight to the child as the child gets older. Well, the government has this doctrine, and I can't never pronounce it right. It's like parental. And so they're saying that every child that is born belongs to the government, and they are the superior parent. You are the inferior parent. Like you got the Supreme Court, then you got inferior courts, which is underneath them. So they're saying that they have it, and they're putting your child in your care, custody, and control. But if you don't do right, then they're the senior parent that they're going to take them away from you.
Right.
And this is perversion. And they're going to mandate that your children go to this public school, and by mandating it, then they're going to take it out of taxpayer dollars, and they're going to put them in a government school taught by government about government religion, which takes them away from our God.
Our God.
So it's perverted.
Yeah.
But a church, and I've said this before, and this is a perfect example. I was preaching on a street corner about sin. A preacher from another church that is an incorporated church, and they licensed him. He's preaching the same message on another corner over there, right?
Okay.
And I didn't know him, and he didn't know me, but we would kind of wave to each other, and cheer each other on, right?
Yeah.
And some of the sins we were preaching on were, quote, highly to the extreme, unpolitically correct, and it just was the scriptures. But he got complained on, and me, for hate speech.
Okay.
The police come down. The police arrested him and took him to jail. I was still there, because when the police come over, I said, I'm a man, and I'm created in the image of God, Genesis 1:26-28, and God, which created everything, says I have these rights, and he commands me and commissions me to preach this. I'm not an incorporated church. I'm under no Secretary of State, under state or federal rules or regulations. I am a free standing sovereign man in a sovereign church. And if you molest me, and they hate that word, but it legally is like trespassing or other things. It's another way of saying it, but that word has been so overused and so bastardized to the point that it just doesn't mean anything except sexual in nature almost.
Right.
I use it correctly, and I said, if you continue molesting me, I haven't touched you. We haven't touched you. And I said, but you're trespassing on my rights and my property, and you're stopping me from preaching the gospel for no good reason. You are molesting me. Well, we're not touching you. I said, you shouldn't enforce the law if you don't know the law. And they said, well, this is a valid complaint. I said, no, it's invalid as a self-evident truth on the face of it if you know anything about the Constitution. Because the Constitution doesn't grant anything. It recognizes and ordains as a self-evident truth in nature, and nature's God. So you could be of any religion. Okay, it just says you just acknowledge nature. It's self-evident.
Yeah.
And some God put it here. You may have a different God, but some God put it here. So there was no litmus test. So if you was Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, it fits.
Right.
Okay. And even most atheists, if you go talk to an atheist, and I said, do you deny nature? No. It's obvious. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it got here somehow. I said, so do you agree that some God, some deity put it here? Yeah. I said, then you believe in nature, nature's God. Whoever that is that you haven't discovered at this time. Well, yeah, I guess actually that's right. I said, so you just figure out who that God is, and then you serve them. Oh, okay. And some people have actually come across, they become Jewish, Hindu, Christian, whatever, but they had a moral underlying.
Right. I think this is a perfect time to just let our listeners know the importance of, if they already have an unincorporated church or ministry or association, or are thinking of doing that, the importance of learning your rights and freedoms as much as you can. I mean, it's a steep learning curve these days. Is the importance of these studies, and I put links in the show notes. So yeah, just letting people know that they've got to study their true rights and freedoms.
Yes. You know, it used to be said when I was a young man and I didn't understand. But I was the kid that always sat around the table when the adults would play cards, you know, whatever, go fish, whatever they were doing. And I would listen to the old folks all the time. And I gravitated for their knowledge and wisdom. I was a little information sponge. And I'm getting bigger, but I'm still absorbing. That's my joke, my self-deprecation. But you don't have any rights if you don't know your rights.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things that is always been taught, and I've always known, and Chris Ann Hall does an excellent job for people that know who she is, an attorney out of Florida. And it's a whole long story, but anyway, she's a lady sold out to God, and I have a high level of respect for her.
We reference her all the time.
Yes, that she literally explains nature's God in various ways. She explains what your rights are, and that the courts have said among these rights, which means a portion, we have no idea what all of our rights are, but we do know this as a portion of those rights. And we're always discovering new rights. And the courts and the founder said through papers and private letters, we know about life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness. We know all these things, but that's only a portion. And each generation will discover additional rights that the people recognize. And so it never shrinks, it just expands. And one thing that the courts have said in some settings that sometimes is, if the people had a constitution and that constitution changed, you may gain more rights, but you never lose. Once a right is recognized, it's recognized. So for example, Texas had the Republic of Texas, which is where I am an inhabitant. Words mean everything. I'm not a resident. That has special meaning. They had a Constitution, Republic of Texas, which was an independent nation. They had a constitution. All the rights and duties were in there. That still stays when they went to a state of Texas constitution. Anything that wasn't written in there doesn't have to be written. It automatically transfers over. And you just keep expanding. You cannot unrecognize what was recognized, because a right is inherent and it's always been. You just didn't know it. It's like going fishing and you went to fish for bass and you caught a catfish. I didn't know there was catfish in here. Okay, now you do. It's a discovery. It's like searching for gold in the mountains or something.
Oh, I love it. That's perfect. Good. You give such good visuals. Hey, thank you so much. And would you like to share a bit about your ministry and how people can get in touch with you and donate as well?
Yes, ma'am. I have my ministry, God told me to call it Sovereign Church of Jesus. And I got a website, sovereignjesus.com. I take my email is Daymond, DAYMOND 4040 at yahoo.com. Daymond 4040 at yahoo.com. And on the donate or family and friends, however you choose, that's where you can donate. and I issue tax deductible charitable certificates to anybody upon request. And I never really thought about this many years ago, but just to be clear, 508c1A unincorporated church, I have an EIN number, which is for banking purposes only, for my church and for my PMA and for my my church ministry trust. So, you know, it's all there. And, you know, I got started off as a police cadet in 78 in Dallas, Texas. And wasn't many years later, I was the chief deputy constable in Lamar County, which is in the Paris, Texas area. And then I went over to work in Oklahoma. And then I went from there down to Florida and spent 20 years there, retired twice as the chief of police. Then I went to Tennessee to work as a captain and teach drug interdiction. But the chief of police was a personal friend of mine, and he said, you have to teach my people how to be people first. Teach them how to be a peace officer, and they have to know that part of being a peace officer is not being a law enforcement officer. Law enforcement officers are robots. A peace officer keeps the peace and tranquility within the community they serve. And arresting people, citation, notice to appear is a last resort, not a first resort. And you try and get people to come together and to join up and to agree to things. And things that could be criminal, if you can get these two sides to agree, we could work this out. You know, you did some damage, you pay for it, we're okay. So one, you have a little small incident report, and they have a lot more respect for you. And I said, oh, you want me to teach them like I taught you when you was a cop under me? Yes. He says, because you've been a cop or a chief of police, constable, Texas Ranger, U.S. Deputy Marshal. You've done something in your entire life, and you've always taught this. And you've never been sued. Forget successfully sued. You've never been sued, because even when people were, you never burned a bridge, and you tried to make peace, you tried to make happiness, and you tried to teach God and his law. God is the original creator of everything. He controls it. God created the law. He controls all the law. And in some courts, they say, from a time before the modern law can remember, these laws were established. And some courts have said our authority is only right and just and proper in our jurisdiction if it originates out of God's laws. And anything repugnant is null and void, because he's the original fountain of law. Right. And he is the authority. So when it's out of scope and it's out of balance, it doesn't exist. We just have to, as the judges, have to say so.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. I will I'll put your email in and the link to the website. Everybody go check that out. It's very important, so much good. I even want to say transformational information there.
Right.
We appreciate you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.